So I think you got a little bit of a warm-up on our topic during lunchtime. We're the water panel, or water and energy panel, and water and energy and technology, I think. Our title is the Drought because we're in a major one right now. And we've got a panel of some of the state's leading leaders in resource management. And I'm going to just briefly introduce them, and then I'm going to, well, maybe I'll tell you who I am. I'm Ellen Hannock. I'm an economist and senior fellow with the Public Policy Institute of California, which is a nonpartisan research institute based in San Francisco, and I lead the work there on water and environmental policy. And then we have, going just from my side all the way over, Franz Weber, who is the vice chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. They are the ones in the middle of the bullseye when it comes to dealing with drought policy, as well as sort of their regular day jobs are dealing with all kinds of issues related to the management of water quality in the state, but also water rights, and that's where the drought is making things especially interesting for them. Then we have Commissioner Catherine Sandoval, who is a commissioner with the CPUC, and she, among her many duties, is one of them is looking at the water energy nexus, and she's just issued some regulations on that she's going to be presenting to you, sort of hot off of the computer. And then we have Grant Davis, who is the general manager of the Sonoma County Water Agency, which does way more than water, and is really one of the leading local or regional agencies in integrated resource management. So I think that's going to be very exciting to hear from him as well. So just as a sort of tee off to the panel, I just want to give you a little bit of background on the drought, since that's the title of our session. We are in the midst of a big one. This is our third dry year, and last calendar year was actually the driest on record since records began to be kept systematically in the late 1800s. If you look at our water years, which really run from October through the following September, because our rainy season is in the fall and winter and spring, it's probably about the fourth driest year on record, but following two previous dry years, it means it's pretty dry out there. And we've already had early season wildfires as one of the signs of that kind of goes beyond the issue of water use per se in the state. But as you've probably been noticing, just a lot of media attention to this issue, a lot of hurt in some of the farm communities of the state in particular, because agriculture is the biggest water user in the state, and in California you have great agriculture if you can add water to it in the summer when it's dry. And so that's been a big challenge to manage. Droughts are a regular feature of California's climate. We have a variable Mediterranean-style climate. They're expected to become a more regular and probably more severe feature of our climate with the anticipated greater extremes that are being predicted with climate change. And so folks are looking at this drought, partly as, okay, how are we doing relative to how we've done in the past, but also really thinking about it in terms of how do we need to get better and more resilient for a future where we might have more of these and more severe of these. And I'd say that some of the stock taking that's being done right now gives us some signs for hope, because definitely our urban sectors, our urban areas are doing a lot better than they would have the last time it was this dry, 1977. There's been just tremendous amount of innovation that's occurred in the urban areas of trying to sort of develop local supplies and more regional solutions, water conservation, water use efficiency, that then allows urban agencies to store more water locally for these dry years, use of recycled wastewater, integrating, people are now looking at capturing stormwater, have that be part of the system. And these are all things where we've made progress and there's a lot of room to get better. What we're also seeing is that the state has some major challenges in terms of modernizing its measurement and tracking systems at the statewide level to be able to handle critical droughts. And that's part of the headache that has been facing Fran's shop, the State Water Resources Control Board, which is in these kind of droughts supposed to be able to curtail at some water uses and just finding, where are the numbers to help us with that. It's also exposing real weaknesses in our groundwater management in many parts of our state. So I would say that there's a lot of need for innovation and help from folks like you all in the room, from the innovators of this state on those issues. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists, and they're going to have more messages for you along those lines, as well as giving you sort of background on different aspects of what we're looking at in water management at the state level with Fran, and then water and energy at the state level with Catherine, and then sort of a perspective from the local and regional level with Grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. It's been fascinating to be here and listen to the other panels. This is quite a wonderful group, and I hope we have time for some questions at the end. I will make sure I move through my comments pretty quickly so that there will be some room. I am Fran Spivey Weber with the State Water Resources Control Board, and my office is in Sacramento. We have 9 regional boards that operate in regions throughout the state, and drought is a big area that we are working on. But what I'm going to be showing you just over the next few minutes is how the state as a whole is trying to address not just drought, but water and energy and the integration of these issues to make government more efficient, to make government more of a collaborator and a cooperator with the public, with the cities and counties that are on the ground and having to do the work. And then you can ask at the end how well we've done. When Grant gets up, he'll be able to say where we have succeeded and where we haven't. In December, the California agencies that work on water, and this is the Agriculture Agency, the Department of Water Resources, and the Resources Agency, the California Environmental Protection Agency, and the Water Board, and others, created this list of 10 items, 10 areas of focus with the governor's office and with the governor. And this helps to shape what the future of how his budgets will be allocated so that we can get these jobs done. And you will see in here, while the drought hadn't been declared when this was put together, the drought is there, but there's the twin of drought, and that's flood. And so we can't just plan for drought and do drought. We really have to do everything. So make conservation a California way of life. That is at the top of the list. And it was put there because it's at the top of the list. It's cost effective, it creates energy efficiency, it creates water efficiency. It is something that can be done in the ag and urban areas, and is being done and can be done a lot more. We just had a hearing yesterday in the afternoon on conservation, and we're likely to be adopting, or at least considering the adoption of regulations, emergency regulations for conservation in the middle of July. So this is a big deal, and it is getting bigger. Increase regional self-sufficiency and integrated water management across all levels of government. Remember again, these are areas where money is going to follow policy, state money. Achieve the co-equal goals of the Delta, that's providing water supply reliability, but also protecting ecosystems, protecting and restoring important ecosystems. Largely this applies to areas that have fish, salmon, endangered species, and the Fish and Wildlife Service is, the California Fish and Wildlife Department has been important in setting this up. Manage and prepare for dry periods You'll see down, just a few more down, it's increase flood protection, expand storage capacity and improve groundwater management, provide safe water for all communities starting July the 1st. The drinking water program is going to be merged with the clean water program, the State Water Resources Control Board. And so we will have in one department both the drinking water aspects of water as well as the clean water aspects of water. That is what that means, and it's a big piece of the budget. I'll show it to you in just a few minutes. Increase operational and regional efficiency. Again, this is there's a lot of interest by this governor in improving the efficiencies of the various agencies, and he's quite serious about it. I know that blow up the boxes has been something that other governors have pursued, and sometimes these things have worked okay, and sometimes they haven't worked at all. We're seeing some real changes and some very exciting operational efficiency improvements. It is hard, and sometimes there are legal barriers, but slowly we are working those out. And then finally, identifying financing. So let me just illustrate how these 10 measures are being dealt with by the governor and with funding. There was a final allocation of, in February of 2014, there was a drought budget that in a week or so had gone through the legislature and had been signed by the governor. It happened in about a week. It was really pretty amazing. And part of it had a fairly large amount of money, not new money that was coming in, but money that had been voted on by the public in the past. They fast forwarded the final tranche of the Proposition 84 and 1E bond monies so that more investments could be made at regional level in dealing with the drought. It called this budget, this February 2014 budget, called for an increase of 10 positions for the State Water Board and $1.8 million in general fund money to address unmanaged and unsustainable groundwater pumping. This, remember, was adopted. We just hired our first people under this budget. And this is the first time we have ever had anyone in charge of groundwater on a supply side. We've done a lot of groundwater work on the water quality side, but not on the supply side. And now we have 10 people who are quite eager to get going. There's 20 million in cap and trade monies that were made available to water for the first time ever, and there's an additional 20 million that was made available to the State Water Project. Monies for the California Conservation Corps to help a lot of the on-the-ground activities, both in fish and wildlife as well as parks and agricultural areas and urban areas. More cap and trade money for the food and ag area to work, again, to address drought, and an increase of 18 million in the outreach program that is housed at the Department of Water Resources, the Save Our Water campaign. So these are real monies that got adopted and are being spent in collaboration with local agencies and others on drought. In this current budget, which is, we're waiting for it to be signed, the drinking water program was moved over to the state board, and we think there'll be efficiencies there. We think that also we'll be able to coordinate our programs to make sure that people who are running out of water, and there are going to be some systems that run out of water in this drought, that they get their replacement supplies more efficiently. We just adopted a permit that would allow for the use of recycled water in some of these areas, not for potable use, but for taking care of some of the agricultural needs that the drought has exacerbated. We are increasing some other areas that aren't particularly associated with drought, but are going to be important. One on fracking, you'd heard about that earlier today, and also an increase of 11 positions to deal with marijuana. Marijuana is creating quite a problem particularly in the Northwest, in the central part of the north central part of the state. And we, as the Water Board, have committed $800 million at 1% interest in a 30-year payback from the State Water Resources Control Board's State Revolving Fund, which is a loan, it's not a grant, but at 1% over 30 years, that's pretty close to free money. And this money can be used and is available for the next 3 years until it runs out. For municipalities and for counties and others to borrow and do more recycling. Again, it's one of our drought measures that we are pursuing. These are some examples, and I emphasize the money part of it because you have all heard, follow the money. If the government is truly serious about what it says it's trying to do, there will be money associated with it. Now, it won't be enough money to achieve the goals that we may have wanted, but it will be a commitment that shows that the agencies and the government are behind an issue. And so I have offered these examples. I'll look forward to hearing your questions as to how some of these monies are being spent, but it's very exciting to have the opportunity to work in a state government that is trying so hard to be so integrated and so regionally focused and so cutting edge. And I think it's starting to succeed.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Let's see. I can get my presentation here. Okay, I've got Fran's. So that looks like mine. All right, let's see. I do a slideshow from the beginning. All right, there we are. Hey. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Catherine Sandoval. I'm a commissioner with the California Public Utilities Commission. So pleasure and honor to be here. Always great to be back at my alma mater. So we'll be talking a little bit about water and energy issues. Actually, Fran's discussion reminded me of some of my early trips to Hollister when I was here. And when you talk about the challenges of water and agriculture, they really are not very far from here. When I was a student, I worked on a program to encourage Spanish-speaking farm worker parents to be educational advocates. So again, here in Palo Alto, agriculture is really still very close, and it's a very important user of water in the state of California. So I wanted to talk a little bit about when Fran mentioned about sources of water, as well as Ellen, a little bit about water sources and some of our work at the California Public Utilities Commission. So the California Public Utilities Commission regulates investor-owned utilities, investor-owned water utilities, electric, gas, telecommunications, rail safety, rail crossings, also charter party carriers, which means party buses, and also things like Uber, Sidecar, and Lyft. And I imagine someday autonomous vehicles are going to fall into our lap as well. So it's a wide variety of things, but it also gives us an opportunity to look at some of the synergies. And when you look at our programs and what Fran was saying about follow the money, the CPUC effectively regulates about 19% of the water ratepayers, but 75% of the electric ratepayers. And And when you look at the interrelationship between water and energy, that in the state of California, water is the largest single user of energy, and nationally, energy is the largest single user of water. The nexus in between the two of them is critical, and our opportunity to address that nexus is really important. And for us, when we can address that is through our energy efficiency programs as well as water efficiency programs. So this map tells us a little bit about why this is critical. So this map is highlighting some of the Bay Delta watershed, which you can see outlined in blue, and particularly, as you can see, hopefully the pink line running right through the middle, the California Water Project, as well as the state and federal water project. So the California Water Project is incredibly important up and down the state of California, and is a very important resource for communities. As we look at Governor Brown's proposals to do some updates to the California Water Project, and these are proposals also that the Bay Delta Commission has looked at extensively, it's important for us to remind ourselves that this is not a Northern California versus Southern California issue. It is an issue that affects all of California. So here in Palo Alto, we are south of the Tracy pumps. In this area and in the Santa Clara Valley Water District, 55% of all the water from the Santa Clara Valley Water District comes from the California Water Project. And the CPUC has been taking a look at the investor-owned utility reliance on the California Water Project. We've been focusing on looking at 2013 and 2012 and before that, because this year the allocation from the California Water Project is zero. But in the past several years, reliance of the investor-owned utilities on the California Water Project has ranged from zero in places where they have a lot of groundwater or other local sources to places like Palos Verdes in Los Angeles, 85% reliance on the California Water Project. Bay Point in the San Francisco Bay Area, 89% California Water Project. And that 100% reliance on the California Water Project is near Ventura. So, it is an incredibly important project for all of California, north, south, central. There are even some places that are north of Sacramento that have heavy reliance on the California Water Project, and also the Federal Water Project. So it's incredibly important to emphasize that this year so far, the allocation from the California Water Project is zero. And so far the same for the Federal Water Project, zero. So one of the problems with this is we never planned for 0% allocations. There have been cutbacks in the past, but no one ever planned for zero. And it reminded me of what happened with nuclear power. When the San Onofre nuclear power plant went out, we realized that the California Independent System Operator, as well as the California Energy Commission and the California Public Utilities Commission, and for the utilities, all of their planning scenarios assumed that one unit of San Onofre would always be available for the life of the plant, and that one unit of the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant would always be available for the life of the plant. There was no planning scenario that imagined neither unit being available for an extended period of time. So that's exactly what happened in Southern California. 2 years ago, in 1 minute, 20% of the generation gone. And so we're dealing with the impact of that. And I thought we learned our lesson. But then this year with the extended drought, and then we realized, oh wow, we never planned for zero. So here we are again. So this is why we're having to do extraordinary steps. So I'll talk a little bit about some of our measures. So as I mentioned, with the CPUC, we regulate a variety of water utilities, 115 water utilities. We divide them by classes, which look at the number of connections that they have, so 9 Class A water utilities. But actually, most of the water utilities that we regulate are very small. They're Class Ds with 500 connections or less. So the Class Ds are the ones that are likely to have the biggest struggles in terms of compliance with water quality, although I would say that because of our extensive supervision with them, supervision is a nice word, but our extensive regulation, most of them really are in very good shape and really good compliance on terms of water quality. So when you look at issues like nitrates or other types of issues, that is largely not an issue for the CPUC regulated water utilities. Sadly, it is an issue that particularly well owners and some municipals, some small mutuals are struggling with. And that's where we're also cooperating with the State Water Board, because I know that there are now some more new proposals where there are some struggling utilities that are interested in being acquired by an investor-owned utility. So we're making it possible for the struggling utility to be able to get the grant or the loan so that they can work with the partner to do the remediation and the treatment, and then later on lead to an acquisition. So our utilities that the CPUC regulates are distributed all throughout the state. So you can see this map and just the great range from the Oregon border down to the Mexican border from east to west. And when we look at the CPUC charter, our charter is to promote safe, reliable service at just and reasonable rates. And so with water, that is also a challenge for clean and safe water as well as reliable water. And reliable water is, of course, very important for human consumption, but also for firefighting. So one of the most critical issues when you also have a drought is maintaining your ability to fight fires, particularly when you look at the high wildfire danger area. And just a couple of quick thoughts on the relationship between fire and drought. So last year, remember, we had that terrible rim fire near Yosemite. So a couple of things happened. So one of the things that they did, which was very smart, was use a lot of the water from the Malones Dam, which was near the fire, in order to fight the fire. That was the closest big source of water. But between using all that water to fight the fire and the third year of drought, the Malones Dam level is really low. In fact, there's a concern that it may go low enough to be below the pumps, and therefore you won't be able to pump out of the dam. So, it really is a dramatic relationship example between water and firefighting. And also when we talk about, I'll mention a little bit about the analysis that the CPUC is doing through the proceeding looking at the water energy nexus. One of the issues that we're going to be looking at is the water energy communications nexus. And that fire also really illustrates the importance of looking at this issue. Through the CPUC's regulation of telecommunications, I've had the opportunity as a assigned commissioner on our proceeding looking at our high-cost telephone system proceeding and rate making for the rural telephone companies. And yes, here in California, we still have rural telephone companies. And for example, when I was visiting one of the rural telephone companies in Oakhurst, which is on the way to Yosemite, Sierra Telephone had worked with CAL FIRE to pre-identify staging grounds where they would respond to a wildfire, make sure that they were set up with telephones, make sure that there's also the backhaul to provide cell phones, right? Your cell phone is only wireless from your handset to the tower. At the tower, it needs to connect to the public switch network so that you can actually call someplace other than it just being a giant walkie-talkie, right? And the tower also needs power. So this is one of the reasons actually why you don't have a lot of cell phone service out in the rural areas is lack of access to electricity as well as lack of access to backhaul. So they made sure that the backhaul was there for the cell phone calls from the firefighters, and they also pre-provisioned the Mariposa County Fairgrounds with high-speed internet access. And this is really critical because what happens now is that with modern firefighting, you not only need the outfits and the axes and the hoses, but one of your most critical pieces of information is your cell phone, where they download not just GIS maps, but dynamic GIS maps that have information about the fire, as well as information about resources and deployment of resources and wind. And so now these people in Mariposa County are going to be able to download that at the Mariposa Fairgrounds and be able to use that information right there to fight the fire. One of the things that happened in the rim fire is that that area has has practically no cell phone service, very, very limited cell phone service. It was not already set up with high-speed communications. And so the firefighters were really hampered with their ability to be able to gather information. So much so that they had to designate some people to drive out of the area to be able to get a cell phone signal, download that information, and drive back in. So you can imagine how that hampered firefighting. So this is just an example of how addressing the water energy communications nexus can help us not only with water conservation and firefighting, but also can help to save lives. So this just talks about some of the major areas that we have for California's water supply. So we think about the Delta, the Sierra Mountain Range, the Colorado, but also groundwater and storage reservoirs. And there are a lot of people right now who, are thinking, well, the drought really doesn't seem that bad. All right, let me tell you, the only reason the drought doesn't seem that bad so far is because we have engaged in a decades-long policy to really promote water storage, most of which is actually underground. Some storage is above ground in dams, but places like the Santa Clara Valley Water District, the Metropolitan Water District in Los Angeles have vast underground reservoirs. I live a few minutes away from a recharge pond, which normally has so much water in it. In the past couple of years, the city of Campbell has had to hire dogs to chase off the Canadian geese who are enjoying our recharge pond. There are no geese, the dogs are unemployed, and it is just dry as a bone. But we've used that in the past to help to recharge the aquifer underground, and that water is what's really getting us through. But there's limit to that, and also we don't know how long that water is going to have to last. In Australia, their drought lasted for 10 years, and though it started to rain in certain other places, the rains really never come back in places like Perth. So this is part of the question, and part of why it's been important with the focus on 2014, looking at the drought, the legislation that Franz Pivy-Wetter talked about, but also a number of our other issues that we're looking at to try to address the drought focus. So a couple of things I wanted to mention, and I'll spend my concluding remarks talking about the Energy Water Nexus proceeding. We have an order instituting rulemaking looking at the issue of whether or not we should take steps to balance rates between districts, recognizing that especially with smaller districts, there are issues in terms of your revenue and rate base. So the proposals will be coming out on that soon. And I also really wanted to focus on our work on the water energy nexus proceeding. So this morning, I was speaking at a Department of Energy summit that was being done as part of their quadrennial energy review report. And DOE actually just yesterday released a report on the water energy nexus. So in this proceeding, we are going to be releasing it. I was talking to our advisor this morning. Our goal is to release it for comment on Monday. What this is going to be is the scoping memo, the proposed scoping memo for the water energy nexus proceeding. And in the CPUC's process, the scope is very important because it determines what issues you will analyze and thus what issues could be encompassed in your order. So we're going to be looking at issues including developing a water energy cost effectiveness tool and a methodology for determining the embedded energy in water. So this is really critical to be able to measure what steps we could take that are cost effective, and again looking at the large use of energy in water as well as the use of water in energy. So this also, as we quantify this, is another way that will help us to be able to use some of the energy efficiency money, for example, to be able to take action. We're also going to be addressing potential actions such as examining the water energy nexus and water conveyance, delivery, use for water storage, stormwater capture, recharge, et cetera. And this is very important, and it's one of the issues that Governor Brown has mentioned because, for example, one of the challenges has been water transfers and water conveyance. And in many ways, when you look at our water infrastructure in the United States and certainly in California is much like the telecommunications infrastructure was 100 years ago, or the energy and electricity infrastructure was 100 years ago. That is characterized by separate, discrete, disconnected utilities. It's like having an electric system with no transmission. And so the absence of that really has hurt conveyance and thus the ability to do transfers between areas that have more water and areas that desperately need water. We're also going to be looking at issues including the agricultural sector, so it's very important to look at that sector because the agricultural sector is the largest single user of water in the state of California. And when we look at residential use as well as commercial use, particularly we're going to focus on landscaping as well as indoor use, because when you look at residential use, most water is used for landscaping. So one of the things that we've heard this year is that in some places, for example, in Santa Clara County where I live now, though I'm from Los Angeles, even though there were calls from the Santa Clara Valley Water District for cutbacks in terms of water use, in the first quarter, people used more. All right, we got to do better than that. But what we're hearing is that people are struggling to do better than that because they've already done the easy things. You know, a lot of people did switch to low flow shower heads. And so making it clear to people what are some of the things that we can do, and again, freeing up some of the money from the energy efficiency proceedings is one of the things that we're looking at so that we can educate people about here's something that you can do either on your own or where your energy or water utility will help you. So we're going to be looking at what we can do in terms of intra-agency coordination to deploy money and an effort from our Energy Savings Assistance Program, which is the energy efficiency program for the poor, to help to address the water energy nexus, as well as the energy efficiency programs overall, to work with our partners, both federal and state and local, as well as tribes, and also to address issues, for example, like the energy water nexus and the energy water communications nexus. So I gave you an example of the energy water communications nexus with regard to the rim fire, and let me just close by saying that is not an isolated example. As I've had the opportunity to travel around this great state, our huge diverse state of 38 million people, when we look at some of the places that are really our watershed lands in far northern California, that is the area that has the least amount of broadband internet adoption. And the reason is, it's not that people up there don't want it, it's that they can't get it, especially in some of the very rural areas. And what also happens in some of the very rural areas, and I'm talking about places like Native American reservations and the Yurok Reservation near Eureka, near the Klamath River, they got plain old telephone service in April of 2014. Okay, they got electricity in most but not all of the reservation in June of 2013. When I met with the chief of the Hoopa tribe and the people running the Hoopa Water Agency, they said it's really difficult to run a water system when you don't have enough broadband to support your SCADA system, your supervisory data acquisition system, and your control system. So addressing the lack of communications is really important so that we don't increase dangers from wildfire, so that we are able to better manage water, so that we're also able to help farmers like those people out in Hollister, because one of the things that I've heard from some of the farmers out there is that, for example, for using things like sensors, you reach a point where you go beyond not only where there's water, but also where there's electricity and where there's communications facilities deployed that make it impossible to use sensors. The Rural Electrification Administration did a great job in electrifying the farmer's house, but they didn't bring electricity to the farmer's fields. And so the CPUC did some work on that 5 years ago, which we're seeking to build upon, where we now created incentives for farmers to be able to switch from using diesel in their fields to electricity. And so now we have the opportunity to really build off of that infrastructure, since now you have electricity in the field, to create mesh networks that can allow us to more efficiently use water and also to deploy energy. So look forward to your comments on this proceeding and look forward to working with all of our partners. So thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Grant Davis. I'm the general manager of the Sonoma County Water Agency, and it's very difficult to come in after lunch in such a vibrant discussion, but I want to just reassure you with one thing. We'll make up a bit of time here. I'm going to go through my presentation pretty quickly. I want to thank Ellen for the moderation that she's trying to do, and with two leaders like Fran and Catherine there, I can tell you I'm convinced that we've got the right folks at the policy level looking at energy and water and where the nexus lies. It's a lot easier said than done. As a water manager, I just want to briefly go through the basics, not unique. We have 2 large reservoirs that we manage up in the Sonoma County Water Agency. We wholesale water to about 600,000 customers. So this is an area about 40 miles north of here, north of the Golden Gate Bridge, in the community of Mendocino, Sonoma, and Marin counties. And the story for this year, obviously, is that despite the rains, the drought is still on. We heard earlier that 2013 was, in fact, the driest year on record. It was by a long shot. When you look at 2013 on this slide, you can see that we are looking at multiple years, and in a very severe case here, that's responding quite a bit of challenges. An example of that, Lake Mendocino, which is the one dam furthest north of us that I'm most worried about this year, is about 45% of capacity. And we had to go to the State Water Resources Control Board, Fran's shop, twice to get urgency change petitions just to be able to hold back enough water to be able to make it through credibly by the end of this fall. So this is a severe challenge. It's one that's testing water managers up and down the state. Contrast that with the larger reservoir I have at Lake Sonoma. That's currently at about 73% of capacity, and that's the lion's share of our water supply. So we're caught with a messaging challenge that one area is doing better off than another under our management, and that's true across the state. There's different regions that are affected by this drought as opposed to others. What I wanted to just share a bit is that quickly, to make up some time here, we're obviously engaged in working with the state policy leaders and also our local jurisdictions, looking at legislative fixes and also coordination and management. I'm really pleased to hear Commissioner Sandoval talk about broadband up in our neck of the woods, because in fact our SCADA system for many of the smaller utilities is all they have, and it's truly a huge need. So if there's an opportunity to work on that, I'm really looking forward to it. So this is some of our challenges this year. We have the official car of 2014. Hopefully you're driving one like that. I also like the official dishwasher 2014 down on the left there. Official multitasking, drip irrigation, and hopefully you all know what the official hose is for 2014. This is what we've had to do to message, and in fact it doesn't always work. You may have been reading the papers here in the Bay Area. We've certainly been trying our best, but the response has not been as rigorous as it should be, and that's part of the challenge. There is some demand hardening, and there's a lot more that we can do. So I wanted to just focus in on this aspect of it before my time, and that is I want to assure you that the faculty and the students here at Stanford, not only have you already been helpful, I'll tell you in a minute, but we need you more than ever. I want to call to action. You heard the governor talk earlier today about how she'd like to see all 50 states mobilized at the federal level with a challenge. And I would say you got to take it one step further, and that is to challenge local government, cities and counties and municipalities, to respond to the state. This state is a leader, and we need to make sure that we're leveraging all of the local resources with the correct alignment at the state, and that's our story. So Fran said this earlier, we could just about be here next year talking about floods. California has a history of very flashy systems front and back. We got floods and we got droughts, and they're multiple year in many cases. And so we have a situation where water managers have to experience management under extreme events and extreme conditions. And so with climate adaptation and climate change occurring, you got to be planning for multiple scenarios, and that really is the challenge. It's also the opportunity for some of the entrepreneurs that are in this room to stay engaged on energy and water, because there's a huge opportunity there. This is just one of them. Had this not happened earlier this year, this is February 8, 2014. It's called an atmospheric river. And we get about 50% of our water supply from these episodes that come in off the Pacific. And we've got to do a better job of understanding these high atmospheric rivers that come in, understanding where they're going to drop the water, how long they're going to drop it, and more importantly, when they're not coming. So an example of this, and this is the area that we're currently working with NASA and NOAA and USGS quite a bit on ascertaining this. We're looking at what happened to us at Lake Mendocino earlier in the year, where we had an atmospheric river come in. These are volumetric rain. These systems stall out over the reservoirs and drop a bunch of water, and in some cases it's the only water supply you get. And in fact, that happened earlier in the year. What you see here is a rule curve. When water managers are looking at, in this case it's the Army Corps of Engineers, we're managing a reservoir based on a 1950 rule curve. And they're very, very strict. This is the Army Corps of Engineers. Their primary concern is flood control. As a water manager, I'm looking at water supply, and that's that tension that we have to work with. You see the spike here that came in. There was about 20,000 acre feet that came in at the beginning of last year that the Army Corps of Engineers literally had to release. That's about what's left in the reservoir right now, about half the water supply that if we had it, we'd make it through this drought comfortably. What we have to do is a better job. The Corps does not have those tools yet, so I'm challenging the students and the faculty down here to work with us, work with the federal agencies to find a way to get the science down, to tell water managers and particularly reservoir managers when these atmospheric rivers are hitting that I showed you, where they're going to land. And more importantly, if they're 2 or 3 weeks out, to hold that water back and don't release it, particularly in arid west like this. So I'm going to wrap up, as I promised. I told Alan that I would back clean up depending on how much time we have left. I really want to get to Q&A, but this is the take home for me. The innovation that's going to occur. We are basically, we hold ourselves up that standard, the water agency. I'm fortunate that my board of directors is also the board of supervisors, which means that we already integrate. My board doesn't do just water, they do healthcare, they do land use, they do transportation, and it's one of the reasons that folks like Margaret Taylor here is helping us work on innovative solutions, and this is just one of them. We heard a lot about solar today, and I'm interested in getting the water industry and the wastewater industry activated into resolving and coming up with better solutions. What you see here is actually taking place in Japan. And this is on a water treatment facility, and this is floating solar. What I am so convinced with about this is the fact that it's one of the hurdles that you have for solar in California is the price of land. More importantly, since I have 8 sanitation districts that I also manage, I'm looking at putting floating solar on my sanitation ponds, and in fact, lo and behold, it actually helps us reduce the amount of algae that we're going to have to actually treat. So you have the cost for the fields is lower. You have a disturbed piece of property that you already own, which reduces our costs, and it helps us in the sanitation process. If this works out, you can then count on us to replicate this up and down the state and be looking at floating solar with sanitation agencies, and the energy water nexus is absolutely explicitly clear. So with that, I just want to engage and encourage Silicon Valley to think about where you are in this process. We've just hit carbon-free water this year, and that means that every molecule of water that the water agency delivers to our customers, 600,000 of them, comes from a renewable energy source. We just didn't dream that up. About 3 years ago, we held a meeting with faculty from Stanford, from UC Berkeley, other academics, UC Santa Barbara, and they launched the idea of carbon-free water. Water agencies can actually adopt those innovative strategies and put them on the ground. And that's where the water agency, and why I think we're here, is we're in the process of trying to do innovation and replicate with a low-cost, high-reward opportunity. And for business, that's what you want to hear. So I'm going to leave you with the official dishwasher, and hopefully we can get into a little bit of Q&A.
Well, thanks to all 3 of you for those great presentations. I have a couple questions in reserve, but I want to give you all a chance to shout out there. So I think we've got some mics making their way. Maybe say who you are briefly before you ask your
John
question.
Rosenblum. I'm an independent consultant. Fran, you mentioned $800 million for recycled water, but then when I looked at the numbers for efficiency, you've got $10 million. Does any of that recycled water budget include efficiency?
I'm so glad you asked that question. That was the very same question I asked day before yesterday. I told you we had a hearing on conservation, and I have asked our finance staff to identify how much money is available in our revolving loan fund for efficiency, hoping that we can match this. We have more money, I'm happy to say, and so we will be putting more money into efficiency than we have before. I want to just quickly also add that there's the WRDA bill, and I don't know what the acronym stands for. It's been
Water Resource Development Act.
Okay, it just got adopted and signed by the president, and there are 2 things in there. One is the revolving loan fund for our agency and for the drinking water agency. We can use that money for efficiency now officially. We used to have to make the nexus to water quality, but now we can officially do it. Secondly, the Corps of Engineers has been told they have permission to manage for flood as well as manage for water supply. So they can start to help grant out on that atmospheric river spike.
Hi, I'm Seth Geiner. I'm on the board of Tree People down in Southern California, and Andy told me to say hi to you. I told you I was coming. The question that I have, just at the very, very local level, we're working, across Southern California. Sorry to all you Silicon Valley for infiltrating your meeting. But the thing that I've really noticed is while there's all this great policy work, there's all this technology that's being put in place, consumers don't have the drought in their sights at all. And then or at a very low level if they do. And then there's also this belief that if El Nino comes next year and there's rain, this will all go away. So how do you guys think, in terms of where you sit, we get people's minds around this, that this is a way of life? And I think the conservation, as a way of life is important, but this is not a one-year issue that can be solved with another year of drought, or of rain, I mean.
So I agree, certainly the messaging is important all throughout the state, north and south. And as I mentioned, I'm from Los Angeles. I've been in Los Angeles 3 out of the last 4 weekends, and it's been very smoggy in each one of those weekends. My husband just changed planes there yesterday, and he said it was also very smoggy. And so I mentioned that because I think that is a huge issue in Southern California, always. And that also we can't solve any of our problems, energy or water, without the participation of Southern California. There are 26 million people who live in Southern California. So, for people in the Bay Area who think you live in a big city, there's only 6 million people in the entire Bay Area. There are more than 6 million people just in the city of Los Angeles. There are 10 million people in the county. It's huge. And so we need the participation of Southern California, but we need everybody. So part of it is, what can we do? Is it about messaging? So for example, we have a new campaign that we've launched for Energy Upgrade California to inform people about energy efficiency. And of course, saving energy indirectly saves water because of the water that is used to produce energy. But also one of the commercials has the California bear. He lives in an energy efficient house, and he walks up to his neighbor who is watering the driveway, and he growls at the neighbor, who then drops the hose. So it's about doing that kind of stuff to make people aware that this is an issue. Like I said, because we have a lot of storage and people are still able to turn on the tap, they're not seeing it as much. But as we get further into the summer, we already have a list of 100 communities that are in danger of running out of water. And it's going to be in July and August and September that we really start to see that really hitting. And especially now, as things are heating up. The other issue with the smog in Los Angeles is that some of that really is fog. And so you have the June gloom season, but it is a little bit warmer in Los Angeles and in Southern California. So I think we're gonna start seeing it get worse very soon.
How's that dog working out for you in your community?
I love the dog. I want to say Tree People, great organization, and Fran's prior work, you resolved a major conflict with water supply. There's one that I want to take this moment to call out, that energy water nexus, renters and multifamily homes generally are left off of the rebate programs. Somehow with the policy, with these two here leading their respective agencies, we need to come up with innovative approaches to where renters and multifamily homes can take advantage of the rebates that allow you to put energy efficiency and water efficiency appliances in. And between that, capture the energy savings and the water savings, combine them and get the economics to work. And we do that statewide, we're going to be able to push that window off. So the innovation like that's going to be required.
Well, and just to follow up on that point, I think it's both a question of what customers can do through rebates, but also what can we do through some of our programs.
Yes.
So I'm the assigned commissioner for our Energy Savings Assistance Program, which focuses on low-income households. And that really is critical because 1/3 of all California households are low income. 2/3 of those people are renters, and most of them live in single-family homes, which in energy land is apparently defined as up to a fourplex. But that's also important because renters here in California are not in huge multi-story buildings, that you see that are more typical of the East Coast. So one of the things that we asked was for the energy utilities for their plans for the next cycle propose, exactly how they're going to address the renter issue. Collaborate, with the landlord associations. When you talk about Los Angeles, the Korean Landlord Association is critical. They need to be coordinating with them. All the different landlord associations are critical with the community organizations, et cetera, but also looking at, a variety of things that you can do. And in the end, we also have to look at, okay, collaborating between our energy efficiency program and the energy savings assistance program, so that we can actually get to things like central air conditioning if it's available in the building envelope and not just the apartment, so that we can really achieve our objectives.
Yeah, John Massey, Tech Advisor. So I have a question. Most climate models I've seen say the U.S. Southwest gets drier, so that's Los Angeles, right? Pacific Northwest probably gets wetter, and exactly what goes on here, the models tend not to agree on. But they all agree it gets warmer, which has an impact on our snowpack. So can you talk about how the models fit in, or projections in terms of less snowpack and the effects? Can you talk about how your agencies deal with that?
Maybe I'll kick off with that. So that's exactly right. That for California as a whole, there's not consensus on what's going to happen to the average level of precipitation. We're pretty confident that we're going to have less snowpack, and that's free storage right now, which we're going to have to figure out how to make up. That's a big part of the debate about whether or not the state should be putting a lot of money into new surface reservoirs or not, because some folks are sort of saying, well, we got to capture it somewhere else. What the modeling shows is that there's a lot of potential to get more of that water underground. We've got a lot of room in our groundwater basins. That's probably the most cost-effective way to do it. But, and this gets back to the discussion about coordinating among agencies, you crucially have to get those rule curves that Grant showed you an example of changed in order to be able to do that. So it's partly being able to change that to anticipate the change in runoff patterns, and again, interagency coordination. You've got to get agreements between the folks that are overlying those groundwater basins and the folks that otherwise would have water in storage. And so that's kind of, I was thinking that the lunchtime speaker talking about the difficulty of the one project that was raised where you had to get the value proposition by adding up 11 different types of gains. Water energy combinations are critically those kinds of value propositions where you've got to get the coordination.
I would say also, I'll just follow up on that and get back to tree people a little bit as well. The collaboration is very important, but there often are sticking points. There are legal sticking points. There are sticking points that people at least are afraid of. They're not sure are there. And an example in Southern California, in Los Angeles, and Tree People has been in the middle of pulling people together from the Department of Water and Power, from the city sanitation, from the county public works, wanting to put cisterns and other kinds of water capture devices on schools. The schools are worried about water coming in from the surrounding neighborhood and being a liability, a risk that they will then be held liable for if they get sued. That is it's a real sticking point. It's stopping there's money, there's will, there's all kinds of opportunity, but this is a sticking point. We're going to have to deal with more and more of those little tiny, apparently, but real sticking points if we're going to open up the opportunities that every community has.
So we have 3 minutes left, so we can have a question there. Is that Secretary Schultz?
George Schultz, Stanford Hoover Institution. Somebody once said, water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So how are we doing on desalinization?
Well, I'll start with that one. The State Water Resources Control Board is developing a policy that we will be voting on in, I think, September. I just got briefed on it yesterday, and we're a little bit fuzzy on the timing, but it's very soon. And it's addressing, it's establishing the rules for what it takes to build or to operate a ocean desalination facility. The absence of those rules has made it very problematic for people to plan, for people to cost out, and often it's raised the cost of doing ocean desalination. We will have this policy in place, certainly by mid-fall. And we are working collaboratively with the Coastal Commission. We have the regional boards that work with us. We're also working with the state lands folks. And so the rules will be there. And all of us have agreed as to how that we will abide by these. And so now it will be, is it really cost effective? Is it the best choice for a water agency to use if they want additional water? Is perhaps direct potable or indirect potable recycled water a cheaper, better choice? Once we get the rules in place, I think, it will, the whole issue of desalination will sort itself out, and it'll be largely based on a cost issue and then on local circumstances.
Great.
30 seconds each for the two of you. And then
So as Fran was saying, the biggest issue with desal is cost. San Diego has decided to go forward with a desal plant. They are constructing the Poseidon plant right now. Monterey, of course, is looking into desal. And I think that there are some very exciting things happening with energy and with storage that can really help us address that issue, because in addition to the rule, the biggest cost barrier for desal is energy. So really trying to get through that energy barrier, and I'm very excited about some things that are happening with storage that might be able to help us get there.
Well said.
thank you to my excellent panel, and thank you to my excellent audience.